Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I'm Greg Heilman with the Sound on Stage, and today I'm joined by Marianna de Fazio. I'm extremely honored to have Marianna here, a woman of many talents. All you have to do is actually look on our website, thesoundonstage.org, do a search on her name, and you'll see all of the things that she's been involved in over the last few years, and quite frankly, my personal opinion of her work, especially as a dialect coach. If you read my reviews, you'll know how I always harp on that for whatever reason. I don't know why. But anyway, and her wide breadth of acting and coaching and all of those things that she brings to the table. She's not only a force on stage, as I'm sure we'll see again in the upcoming Seattle Public Theater production of Letters from Max, but it seems like whenever dialects or accents are involved in theater around the sound, Marianna's name is always being mentioned. So welcome to the show, Marianna.
Hi.
Happy to have you here.
Thank you, and thanks for the lovely words.
Well, I do want to talk about your upcoming role in Sarah Ruhl's Letters from Max, which opens on February 28th.
Correct, yeah.
At Seattle Public Theater. But the real reason I wanted to talk to you, and I've been looking forward to doing this for a long time, is to talk to you about your work with accents and dialects. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've watched, and watching the amount of theater that I do, you sort of notice trends and things like that. And when you pick up the differences between people who do accents well and people who just kind of stumble their way through them, which, quite frankly, when I had to do an English accent in a couple of shows, I stumbled my way through.
Sure.
You sort of do certain words that make you sound English, whether it's just saying hello, whatever. And it's just, but when somebody does it well, you know it. And your name is always associated with the ones when I see them done really well. So, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is what I mean when I refer to performing accents completely, which isn't just the voice, but it's mannerisms, it's facial expressions, it's everything. And I want to talk to you about that in a little bit. But first of all, let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started with this? Is it something you've always had a knack for?
Well, that's a great question. I think, yes. I mean, the accents and voices have always been fun for me. And I do think, as a kid, pretend voices, like even Looney Tunes, like that kind of thing was just a way in for me. I don't know if I was a knack at it. Some people really can just do the whole repertoire. They have such an ear. They can kind of mimic many, many accents and, on a dime. I don't know if I could do that ever, but I always enjoyed doing it. And then I'd say other things that I've learned, from doing it that influenced me at the beginning were choir and the vowels and some of the parts of speech and some of the vocalizing through some of the sounds that is affected. And also the fact that I studied German. I picked up German at the same time when I started in theater, which was freshman year of high school. And I kind of continued on both of those tracks simultaneously for a long time, and I kind of couldn't decide. I loved German. I had friends there. I traveled there several times in high school and then in college, and then I lived there. And I lived in Austria, not Germany. But I went over, and that was my first job after college, was as a Fulbright teaching assistant in Austria, and made such wonderful connections and was able to use the language, and really that's when I became fluent. So learning another language and being in that position, I think, set me up for the dialect coaching, or at least made me very sympathetic to what it is, how vulnerable it is to be speaking in another voice that doesn't sound like you. And so I had that approach to it, and kind of in the background. But then I went to graduate school. So what happened in Vienna was that I was teaching English, topical English, and using the German, but less and less. Actually, once I kind of finished with the Fulbright teaching assistantship, I found a theater. And it was an English-speaking theater, and I was part of the ensemble. And I was doing American plays and British plays in Vienna.
Oh, wow.
And it was not that I was not using the German, because I was using it on an everyday basis, but really my friends were from all over the world at this theater doing English-speaking plays. And that's when I was kind of like, I think it's not German. I think it's not going to be German, And I kind of, that chapter was closing in Vienna. I was now 26, 27, and I was like, I need to make a decision about what my life is going to be. And I was like, I'm going to go to graduate school for theater. And I applied kind of willy-nilly to some programs in the U.S. Now I know how competitive it is, and I really was very lucky. And I got into the UW. And so I came to Seattle sight unseen. I'd never been to the West Coast. And I came out here for graduate school. And that's where I really learned the dialects. I'd already been using British English on stage and possibly New York, some of the kind of more standard ones that most actors have a sense of, But I learned how to learn a dialect. I learned the breakdown. I learned the linguistic portion of it, all the things that I had been, kind of intuitively understanding. I learned, I had a name for them. And then, but I don't even think in grad school I was pinned for a coach. I wasn't such a star at it that my professor was like, you should become a dialect coach. I mean, I just sort of stumbled into it. Actually, it was after graduate school. There was a Jen Hammond, who's an actor.
I know Jen very well. We've interviewed her before.
That's right. She's an actor friend, dialect coach, mentor. She couldn't take a gig that was for a German accent. And she was like, I know you speak German, and I know you have an MFA, so here, you want to try this? And I was like, never done it before. It was at Taproot, by the way, and they took a chance on me, and I learned from there. I learned how to teach it, which is a bit different,
I can imagine, yeah.
So that was where, and then it kind of just went from there. I mean, I've never really stopped from that moment. So I really have Jen to thank for that, for being like, hey, you could do this.
Yeah, is it, the one thing that I have to imagine is when you get to teaching or learning an accent, it's more than just imitating it. And there's a lot of nuances there between dialects, especially when, even in America I grew up in Pennsylvania, so I know that Philadelphia's got an accent, Central Pennsylvania's got an accent, Pittsburgh's got it. There's accents and dialects everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so when you're working on a show, I'm sure you're working with different actors with different dialects and nuances and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, every show is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Every cast is a little bit different. Every director has different asks, different priorities. Yeah, and it's always a question of what is really. I've come to learn that the main idea is the storytelling. What is going to aid the story, and so that might mean actually backing off, going a little bit less authentic than we might. We start at a place of authenticity in terms of our research as dialect coaches. You want to get exactly what, go to the text and be like, this character says they are from, or the playwright says this character is from such and such a place. And then you find as many native speakers from that place as you can. And from there, I'll build a sound change sheet so that it is really, really zeroed in, meaning that's the vowels, the consonants for that specific region. And that can change, though. So, I'll get into the rehearsal room, and I'll be like, oh, either this actor is not capable, that does happen, and it's not that they're not capable at all, but, the nuance mm-hmm. of this specific dialect is not going to be one that they can weave in easily. Right. And then time is always an obstacle, so within the time given, because everyone can, given the time. We just don't have much time.
Yeah.
It's just not useful. Getting super authentic and super, super broad with the dialect is going to actually stop the audience from understanding. And then it's not useful. What good is it? Great, you're authentic. No one can understand what you're saying. Yeah. So dialing it down and making it more digestible, both for the actor and for the audience. So sometimes it's we start at a place of authenticity, and then that goes in the garbage. It's what can you do, and what does the story need?
Yeah.
So it changes, and it feels... I think when I first started coaching, I found that really reductive. And I was I hated that. I was we have to be authentic. We have to honor the
purist.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And now, I would refuse to send sound samples. So, we always send native speakers. And, now there's so much online you can find for the actors to be able to listen to and kind of immerse themselves. And I would not send certain types of things like cartoons, like Looney Tunes. Because I'd be New York, Bugs Bunny, New York is not appropriate. Like, we are learning a dialect. I was very, like, academic about it. And then I was like, you know what? Forget it. If that's someone's way in to being hearing that specific sound change, because they knew Bugs Bunny did it and they've always heard, well, listen, great. Whatever gets you there. I've become a lot less precious about it.
Yeah. Well, it's the work you do when you're presented with a piece that has accents from a specific region or whichever. Is the work that you do similar to what a dramaturg would do?
It crosses over for sure, and it depends on. It's part of it is there a dramaturg already engaged for this project? Like, how much do I have to do? How much time am I going to be able to give it? Because I do work with a lot of different groups, and they're able to pay me different rates, so I kind of have to, monitor my time in one way or another, and sometimes that's the way. But often I will send a lot. I'll send whatever I've been researching, which is place information, and sometimes also general stuff that they can think about. There are other vocal choices we can make that go beyond just the vowels and the consonants, and it's like you can play with. I mean, it's very simple, but actors we forget all the really simple things. Rate of speech, like how fast does your character speak, or a melody, ups and downs, all the intonation things. Like, there you can make a lot of different choices, so reminding them of that in addition to whatever research.
Yeah, and that's a good point when you talk about rate of speech, because some of that also plays into the type of story you're telling. You look at something like, you speak about Jen Hammond, who was just in Blithe Spirit,
That's right.
which has a quick pace to it.
Boy, howdy.
Yeah, and they have to speak quickly and maintain their accents and do all that. And they did a really fine job with that one.
Yeah, they came right out of the gate, right?
Yeah.
It was like fast, and it maintained that pace.
Yeah.
So you got used to it. You got used to it, and I didn't feel like I lost the jokes.
No.
I fully understood every word of it, but I was like, whoo, they are like coming out, just speeding through.
Yeah, in fact, the pace of that show. So I had seen a community theater version of Blithe Spirit probably a few weeks before. Just in pacing, took 30 minutes off of the runtime of the show.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's amazing.
I'm working on it right now. They're doing it over at Second Story.
Yes.
So
yes.
that is a similar group of friends and
Molly
colleagues.
Hall and Jason Gingle. Yeah, I'll be there. I think the week after it opens.
Okay, great.
So it's on the calendar.
I'm working
It'll
on
be
that
my
one,
third
too.
Blithe Spirit this year.
You'll be Blithe Spirited
Yeah.
out. And you'll see, I mean, also, in addition to the amount of text, there are these arguments that kind of are circular, and they just kind of go repeating the same thing. It's like not easy text. And of course, there's that pitter-patter. But there's something really fun about that era, that British, in that era, and specifically Noel Coward. So we're having fun with it.
Oh, it's such a funny show. It's fantastic. So the next question I have for you is, do theaters come to you? Do you solicit work from theaters at this point? Is it a little bit of both?
That's a good question. Have very rarely had to go and solicit theaters. And when I have, it's usually goes nowhere because they have their people that they go to, like the production side of things. They have their list of dialect coaches, and I'm not on that list. And reaching out doesn't really matter. So mostly they reach out to me, and it's word of mouth. So there's enough of it that I don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, there is a lot of theater in the area. That's one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is in every corner of the city and beyond, there's just a ton of stuff going on.
And actors have come to kind of expect or hope for coaching, or like and to expect that, so that companies who never before have hired a dialect coach are now reaching out and being like, I don't know, we've never hired a coach, we've never either needed it or been able to. Would you be willing? And there's something about that I enjoy, because it's like I'm able to kind of shape the. It's not that there's a program starting or anything like that, but I mean, like, kind of teach them how to work with a coach. Like, this is my scope of work. This is all of the things that I'm doing, and here's how you break it down so that you can present it to your board and justify the stipend that you're going to pay me. And for the producers, it's really interesting to be like, I didn't know all the work that goes in. I've never seen it listed like that. So I feel like there's a teaching element, to the production companies too.
Yeah, well, I can imagine for smaller theaters who usually you have a director, an assistant director, the standard creative team, choreographer, all that. And when you start introducing more people, it probably teaches the actors, a little bit about how things are as you get to larger theaters and
Yeah.
From that educational aspect. So that's probably a nice
Yeah,
kind of
and it's
added
like this
bonus
is
as
what
well.
I try to teach, explain like this is what you can expect from me as a coach, and this is what I will expect from you as an actor, and I don't say it as directly as that, but that's also true with the production side of things, and it is the coach. Dialect coach is kind of like choreographer, kind of like fight coach, in that we're like on the artistic side of things. And design-ish, like in a certain way. I'm also kind of a sound designer. I mean, not exactly, but sometimes I think of myself that way. But like we're in the room with the cast too, so we kind of go between worlds.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to what I had talked about a little bit before, is this whole idea of performing an accent completely. And I just saw Dial for Murder at Village Theater.
Oh, great! Oh, wonderful.
And it was the one of the things I loved about it was it had Calder Schilling and Richard Sloniker, who had been in the Jeeves
That's right.
stories.
That's right.
And I mean, the one scene I loved was when they're just standing on stage looking at each other. Have I seen you before? It's kind of a, and I don't know if it's probably in the script that way, but because of the story, but it just.
That's
I don't know.
funny.
The fan in me just loved that. But anyway, so Richard's accent is very similar to that he uses as Jeeves. He's kind of that aloof, Englishman. Calder's is completely different.
Oh, that's good to know.
But and it's not just the way he delivers it vocally, but it's also his mannerisms. He's more working class, more blue collar. His character's an ex-convict.
Okay.
So. When you're teaching an accent or a dialect, do you also teach those parts of it, the facial expressions or mannerisms, and hey, this your character is of a certain social class, so you don't want to deliver the accent with a certain way facially.
Well, we try to stay away from things like facial expressions, definitely, and I'd say I try to keep all of my notes to being vocal through the vocal lens.
Okay,
that's how I put it, because it risks stepping on toes with the director, and I don't we don't want to do that. And if they have other coaches for fight or whatever, then like trying to keep it compartmentalized.
Sense, yeah.
So like this is all vocal stuff, but there are times where I will. Remind them, and as part of the research, which we talked about before, like what is their character's upbringing? What is the socioeconomic situation? What was it growing up? What is it now? Their education level. These things might affect, and it's like we don't want to look at cliches, but we want to look at all the full picture. And then, like I also mentioned, the vocal choices. Like you can slow it down, and you can bring it into a different placement in your face, and that might change the delivery of it. Yeah, we'll talk about that sort of thing, but it wouldn't be. I would try to not hit it quite on the nose and be like, say it this way, try it this way. Hold your body in a certain way. Like that wouldn't really be the approach.
Okay, well that makes sense. Yeah.
And the other thing about like weaving it in, like thinking of dialect work as just your character's spine. It's not layered on top, and so starting early. And coaches like to start early, and if I can even get in before the rehearsal process, just to get them time with it, so that they can begin to like really, really layer it in. It's not an extra afterthought. So that's how I think you really feel lived in as the character, and it also gives you time to play with different things and junk the ideas if they're not good.
Yeah. Do you encourage your actors to use their accent backstage, at home?
It depends. I would encourage that with if I'm teaching high school and college. Some coaches do encourage that. I as an actor never did that. That was not something that I felt like I could do. I've always been able to compartmentalize it. But I do encourage the drilling. Even like old fashioned. I've actually gone back to that. Like drill. Like put on the tape, the dialect tape or whatever you have, and just like drill it. So that would be more my approach. Instead of like just immersing yourself and kind of hoping that it'll seep in, drill. Old school rote, just drill it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I heard a story, I forget which show it was, Kate Winslet, who's done a number of different accents. Another actor that she worked with said that she was just able to turn it off and on. She'd go backstage and with her normal English accent, and then I think it was Mare of Easttown on HBO. And then as soon as she got on stage, just turn on her Philadelphia accent just like that missing a beat.
She probably had done that work. You know, she at some point in her process like made it so that she could do that.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to step kind of to the side of your work with theaters and theater groups and talk about your work with individuals. And on your website, you offer a number of services to individuals: presentation prep, accent modification, and dialect services. For anyone who's interested in improving in these areas, and these are not just for actors.
That's right.
So could you tell me a little bit about these services and how non-actors can benefit? I think some is pretty obvious. As someone who's in business and in the corporate world, I could see some benefits, especially for some of the presentation stuff.
Oh, sure, yeah. So sometimes I will coach. I think all of it falls under the umbrella of public speaking. That's how I think of it. And then I'll kind of compartmentalize it for myself into, the theater stuff. Like I will coach dialects, either for a full production or for individual actors preparing for an audition. And sometimes I'll do acting coaching. There's that. But for professionals, then it becomes either presentation prep or just general public speaking. People don't have an actual presentation coming up, but they want to work on their stage fright, or they know they have one eventually and they just want to kind of get ready. And especially as things moved online with COVID, I was doing some of that, and then moving back onto their feet with people in the room. And just like most of my things, it ends up having a voice and speech focus, although we can talk about a lot of different things. And then the biggest crossover with the dialect coaching is the accent modification. And that I work with individuals. I prefer working one-on-one. I could do small groups, but it's people across industries. It's really interesting, mostly tech because of being in Seattle. So a lot of tech workers, but I've worked with priests and pastors, people who are doing public speaking, and people, I'm trying to think what other industries, teachers, anybody who's using their voices, but some people just speaking up in meetings just have trouble with that.
Is it things like projection, or just making what you're saying more clear, or is it making it in a voice that's just more understandable?
With the accent modification, it's usually ESL speakers, although I have sometimes worked with American English speakers from a different region. Okay. And that's kind of always existed, that people are taking elocution lessons or trying to reduce if there's some broad accent. And this is that for non-native English speakers. And it is trying to get the accent in line with standard American English. And really the goal is clear communication. So there are some people who are accented and might always be. And I try to be really clear about that, that it's in no way my job to tell you how to speak, to tell you that the way you speak is wrong, to reduce or modify you. Not at all. But to make it, look for patterns, look for things that we can either sometimes overall patterns in your speech, or specific words that you use all the time, and that's another way in for people. But really, it's about understandability and clear communication.
Getting rid of the ums and the ums and the ahs and the...
That may be. But there's always people who are giving presentations in their second language. I mean, there's so many people, and I think we have no idea how hard that must be. I mean, like I do from being in Germany for like this much time of my life, Germany and Austria, but like people do that every day. Yeah. Every day. So...
Yeah, it's got to be stressful. I remember taking Spanish in high school, and until you get to the first point of when you start thinking in that other language, I think that's the first step in maybe getting towards a fluency. But that's only part of it. I mean, that's the understanding of it, and then being able to have the confidence to speak to people who maybe that's their primary language. Mm-hmm. You must sound extremely slow to them.
But the people I work with have been here forever, and they're working already at a high level. It's never held them back from getting a job. So I remind them of that, and I congratulate them. I'm like, you've gotten so far on your own. What can we do now? How do we get you to the next level? So then it does become like dialect coaching. I'm like, let's look at the vowels of English. And sometimes it's very remedial. Like we're going through A, E, I, O, U, and actually there's a lot more vowels that are not spelled that we just pronounce, which people don't know, and that they've been holding their tongue in the wrong place, or something, adding a sound that didn't need to. And sometimes it's mind-blowing for them. It's so eye-opening. They're like, I didn't know, I've been saying this wrong forever. And then it's about not crushing them with that. Hopefully it's a good aha moment. And then we'll maybe go through the consonants and the same thing and be like, okay, and then how do we apply these? And it's like, oh, all these cases is how we use this and that. And they'll be like, I've been hearing this always. I never knew what it was. And I'm like, let's practice it. So we'll talk a lot about placement, like position of the face. We'll get away from reading. Often it's a very oral thing. But people are reading and they need to be able to understand what it is that they're seeing and how that's pronounced in all the different ways. English is very hard in that way, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
Like, we don't help people out, so yeah. But it's a fascinating thing. And I enjoy dialect coaching because it has a limit. It's like, we have a really clear goal, we have a production, and it has an end. The accent coaching, accent modification, and has no end. You could, it's the rest of your life. It's your everyday speech. So in that sense, it's harder. But when people kind of when you see the changes happening, it's really satisfying.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's move to some of your work on the stage. Last season, you were in the Praditwani React co-production of Letters of Suresh and Harlequin's Pride and Prejudice. And I'm actually headed to Harlequin tonight.
Good. Great.
And this season, you're in the upcoming Letters from Max, noticing a theme.
Yeah, I know, right? Is there something about that style? One might have led to the other, maybe.
Opening next month at Seattle Public Theater. So, first of all, with your coaching work, how do you find time for the stage? And I gather a role must mean something to you for you to go after it with,
oh, sure.
Trying to balance that time.
Yeah, acting was the first love. Acting was the first, and it takes the most time. So when you get a role, like I try to clear the schedule so that I can focus on it. It's not easy to do, and it's not happening this time, actually. But that would be the ideal, because with dialect coaching, it really is about my availability. There's certain days where I need to be available, but other than that, I can make it mine, which means, for better or for worse, I can stack those gigs. So I can do probably 3 or 4 dialect coaching gigs at once, whereas I can really only do one acting, because you have to be there the whole time. And definitely with this play, I have to be there every day. There's 2 of us.
Yeah,
I'm there.
2-person cast.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, there's no understudy, and there's no breaks. So I knew this, and I knew this one would be big for me, and so I started long ago. I started in November. But even before November, I was already doing all the background research so that I kind of had done that and read all the things I knew I wanted to read. And then I started with the lines a couple months ago, because I just can't cram anymore. The old brain it just doesn't let me do it. So
yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what can you tell us about the show and about your role in it without any spoilers or anything?
Well, it is one that we know how it ends, so it's not really a matter of spoiling it. It's a play that's based on the letters and the communication between Sarah Ruhl and her former student Max Ritvo, and they got to know each other at Yale when he was a student in her playwriting workshop, and they became mentor and mentee because he was a poet, more than a playwright, but a brilliant writer and a brilliant mind. So they clicked and started exchanging letters, became friends, so it became texts and emails. I think a lot more of it is that than actual letters anyway. But pretty soon into their knowing each other, he had a resurgence of some cancer that he had as a younger person, and it got worse and worse and became a terminal cancer diagnosis. So they're looking at that together. They're looking at it through poetry, through words, through plays, through art, and facing death. And they're also looking at it through all the different approaches to the afterlife, because they both kind of are questioners of it and open to many different. So you really it's so many words, and it's not just words, it's huge ideas. It's very metaphysical, poetic. So letters, poems, monologues, some dialogue. It's a doozy.
Yeah, and with those multiple styles, it's because one thing I've learned is in doing the few shows that I've done is, when you're doing Shakespeare and you get into that Shakespeare mindset, once you get into it, you're okay because it's that rhythm and all of that. But if you've got to do poetry and you've got to do, prose and you've got to do, a number of different things, it's kind of you switch gears.
It is, yeah, and Sarah Ruhl's very imaginative as a playwright. She creates these worlds, and it's I don't know, magical realism may or may not be the actual term for it, but it's very imaginative, and this is no different. So, we are kind of in. Actually, we even had a moment in rehearsal. I don't know if this will make it into the play, but we were like, "Where are we?" And it was like, "We are nowhere." It was like blank, like in those shows, like I think of The Good Place, where it like goes blank,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just nowhere. And I was like, I know exactly what that is, and that's what this moment needed. And it's like, so that, yeah, what style is that? I don't know, but we're together. We're looking at each other. We're not looking at each other. We're kind of looking. Yeah, I mean, it's really, really creative, and we're hoping that helps people. Like, it's a lot of words, a lot of text, and we don't want people to be like, are they still talking at any point? That they'll be like delighted at, like, oh, this is how they communicated. This is also a way that they communicated. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like it's the kind of play that's going to make people think, and honestly, that's that's what I like about this time of year in theater too. The holidays, you have these kind of feel good, either big musicals or family-oriented plays, and then right after that you get these heavy thinkers or these mysteries.
That's
or
right.
these, yeah. So and I love plays that think. I mean, my wife and I, our favorite ones are the ones because we have such a long drive home from all these shows are the ones that we could talk about on the way home.
Yeah.
And this sounds like one that's right up that alley.
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and we're hoping. It's not. It's not a light one, but but it is joyful in the end, and it's like, it's a joyful journey through grief, if there's such a thing as possible.
And this is straight Seattle Public Theater. Last few shows I've been there have been co-productions.
That's right. This is the only one I think this season that's not a co-pro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because last year there was the Pradetwani one, and then we just were at the one with Seda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which was very good as well. But you were there the same night we were.
That's right.
Yeah, you stayed for the Farsi.
That's
one,
right.
but
We did.
We skedaddled.
So interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't. I imagine that was pretty.
It was really interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
to be like, oh, they're at this point. Oh, at this point. But you already kind of knew the story by that point,
Yeah.
so you could follow along. And also just the different styles. Each actor was different.
Yeah.
Had their own approach. So.
Yeah, language is beautiful.
Yeah.
So what do you have upcoming after? So you've got Blithe Spirit coming up on the dialect side.
Yeah.
You've got Letters from Max.
Yep. Well, after the Letters from Max, there's nothing yet. Just auditions right now. But I'm also working. So Blithe Spirit, I'm coaching Mamma Mia at Bishop Blanchett High School, and there's only one British character in that, so that's pretty light for me. But I enjoy working with Bishop Blanchett. And what else? There's Burien Actors Theater is doing a new play. Well, new to us. It's 2017. David Eldridge's Beginning. So that's a beautiful one too. It takes place in the UK. It's kind of like Fleabag a little bit, like this couple that comes together unexpectedly and in a very modern, strange way, about dating in New York in London. What else am I working on?
Burien Actors Theater, for anybody who's not been there, first of all, they get new seats in their auditorium.
Good.
But they won, I think it was Scott Brown who won our award for Best Actor in a Play for his work in Red last season. It was just unbelievable. They put up some really different plays there, so that sounds like another good one.
Yeah. And I think that's... Oh, and I'm coaching at Seattle Pacific University, where I also have a relationship with them and have had for a while. And we are doing Voice of the Prairie, which is an interesting one. I don't know if you know that one. It's about the early days of radio. And there's a New York character, and he's kind of the sales guy for the early radios in the Midwest. And then he's in Nebraska, this character travels from the Nebraska all the way down through the Midwest down to Mississippi and finally to Louisiana.
Oh,
So
wow.
the dialects, it's a
Yeah.
huge dialect spectrum. And his grandfather was Irish, so we have like there's probably 7 dialects in that one. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, have you had to work in with it? I'm sure you probably have a dialect that's a derivative of something. So, somebody moves from Ireland, moves to the South, and obviously their accent is a combination of the two.
Oh.
Have you had to work in a
That's a great
situation like
question.
that?
Have I? Probably I have, but like that's pretty rare on stage. Those are great because you meet people like that all
Yeah.
the time, right? And you can hear both, and you're like, oh, that's fascinating. Nothing comes to mind though.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Is it easier to work with the younger folks or the older folks, or older folks a little more stodgy and set in their ways? And
It could be both. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. I enjoy working with the high schoolers because they're game, they're game for everything, and they're having so much fun. Like the energy in the room is just like so that's fun as opposed to like the more tired adults. But you can get people who are set in their ways and kind of giving you a big no as a coach, kind of at any point in life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it probably depends what's going on in their lives.
exactly. Yeah. you
Teenagers
just
have a lot of serious stuff going on.
gotta- That's right.
So very cool. Well, thank you, Marianna, for
Thank
taking the
you.
time to sit with me and talk about all of these things that you have on your plate and all of your wonderful accomplishments.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
So we're looking forward to Letters from Max opening at Seattle Public Theater on
February 28th.
Thank you, February 28th. I know it's here somewhere. And then Blithe Spirit opens at Second Story Rep coming up. I don't have the date here, but we'll put it in the
I think it's the week
show
before,
notes.
the 21st.
Okay, the 21st.
Yeah.
Okay, and watch out for my reviews of both of those shows. So I'm planning on attending both of those. So once again, thank you all for joining me here on Behind the Curtain. I'm Greg Heim with Sound on Stage. And on behalf of my guest, Marianna de Fazio, thanks again for joining me. And until next time, I will see you at the stage door.